name is Chris Walton. I'm the CEO of CRIBE, Center for Research and Innovation in the Bioeconomy. Jeff has asked us to talk a little bit about Ontario and the opportunity with Ontario as a feature province for the forest bioeconomy. We're going to do a bit of a fireside panel discussion, but I think first I'd like to introduce up the Associate Minister of Forestry and Forest Products for Ontario, the Honourable Kevin Holland. Kevin is a long-standing champion of the forest sector in rural Ontario. He's got 20-plus years in the municipal and was recently elected to represent Thunder Bay, and has most recently been given the portfolio as the Associate Minister of Forestry and Forest Products. So I'm going to have Kevin's going to do a quick welcome and introduction for Ontario, and then I'll ask the panelists to come up. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. It's a tremendous pleasure for me to be here today and be invited to the conference and be given an opportunity to provide some remarks on behalf of the Government of Ontario. So I really want, on behalf of Premier Ford and our entire government, welcome you to Ontario, and thank you for your commitment, the demonstration of your commitment to this sector by being here today at this conference. I had the opportunity yesterday to take in some of the panel discussions, and it's really clear to me that the future of our industry is in this room. The bright minds in this room and how we can move the sector forward was a great opportunity for me to learn more about what we need to do. As Chris indicated, I'm new to the role as Associate Minister to Forestry and Forest Products, but I think it also demonstrates our government's commitment in that we've carved forestry and forest sector out of another portfolio to really give it the attention we feel it needs, and moving forward the sector to continue to provide the stability for the sector moving forward. So, prior to being elected as MPP, I was the mayor of my small community in northern Ontario, northwestern Ontario, for 31 years. And the forestry sector is what built the economy of northwestern Ontario, and I believe is going to continue to be the backbone of the economy moving forward. So to be given the opportunity by Premier Ford to serve in this capacity is very humbling to me, but very welcoming and very important, not just to Ontario as a whole, but also to my riding in particular. So I look forward to today's discussion and the panel that I'll be participating on, and look forward to engaging with more of you during the day while I'm here. But again, welcome to Ontario, welcome to the conference, and I really appreciate you being here. So that's good.
Great, thank you, Minister. So the panelists want to start to come up, so we'll just introduce them as they come up. So we've got Ian Dunn, who is the President and CEO of the Ontario Forest Industry Association. We got Jason Rasevych, who's principal, I got to make sure I get this right, Jason. Waawoono Consultancy, and Glen Prevost, who is the program manager of the Ontario Woodlot Association. So. I'm going to do set a little bit of a context here about what we're going to be talking about. And so typically, when I've been asked by Jeff to come here and present, I'm usually talking about all the great things that we can do with wood, and advanced building materials, fuels, chemicals, and really pitching our vision of the bioeconomy and what we've been doing in Ontario. But I think we decided to do a slightly different approach for this one, which is really about, I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room that there's a tremendous opportunity in the bioeconomy. We think wood is a solution. We think there's lots of renewable molecules. It can be done sustainably. But the number one question that keeps coming up no matter what we do as an organization is feedstock. Feedstock, feedstock, feedstock. Supply, sustainability, costing. Is it there? Does it exist? How do I get it? And so that's kind of going to be the theme. So I'm not going to stand here and talk about all the great things we can do with wood. I want to talk about all the great wood we have here in Ontario. So I'm also going to do a little geography lesson and also a little SFL, Sustainable Forest Management Licensing 101, for folks who don't understand, maybe or know how we do business in Ontario. I am going to leave this map up just throughout for the discussion purposes. If you don't already know, Ontario is big. It's really big. If I were to get in the car and drive home to where I live in Thunder Bay, that's a 16-hour drive. If I wanted to go to the Manitoba border, that's a 20-hour drive. It is a large, big, province. The highlighted little zones there are, that is what's called the managed forest, or the area the undertaking used to be called. That is the managed forest in Ontario. Ontario is 80% Crown land, 90% of our wood supply, roughly, I think, is Crown land, which means it belongs to the Crown, it belongs to the people of Ontario, and it is managed by the Government of Ontario, or essentially managed by the Government of Ontario through licensing. And so each one of these little outlines is a sustainable forest license that the government has granted to a company or a group of communities or other folks to manage on behalf of the Crown. So it's a complex, highly rigorous, highly structured, sustainable forest management across this province. Every little dot is a forest management facility. It's a licensed facility. There's over 100 facilities currently in the province, ranging everything from pulp and paper to energy to small mom and pop sawmills. So the north, this is, primarily the boreal forest. And if we talk a little bit about what we heard from Derek and Lacey yesterday, it is the boreal forest. It needs to be turned over. It is a forest. It's an ecosystem that is built around fire and turnover, which is why we need to manage it. So the one number that I want to point out is the 13.4 million, it's probably about 13 or 12 now, is the cubic meters down in the bottom corner there, a million cubic meters of wood that was harvested. That is about 50% of our annual allowable cut in the province of Ontario. We can harvest sustainably, which has been, back to if you remember the conversation yesterday, less than 1% of the land base per year. We are undercutting by over 50% right now, which presents a tremendous opportunity to be able for these mills to produce more value for them from their facilities. We at CRIBE, we've run numbers and run analysis. We've actually modeled every stick of wood within that map that are on forest resource inventory, and we've come up with a number that we believe realistically is probably about a 10 million ton per year opportunity in this province. And that includes everything from merchantable wood that should be turned into long-lived wood products at these sawmill operations and pulp mills, but also includes residuals, roadside slash, manufacturing and processing residuals. This is a massive opportunity when the world is looking for renewable molecules. We're sitting on basically at least 10 million tons a year that we can tap into. So what I'm hoping is we're going to have a conversation with these folks here about how do we get to that and what the best way to approach that. So I'm going to move over here and take up this mic and instead of standing here and go from there. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to, the first question is over to the Minister Holland. Obviously, we're well positioned within the Canadian North American economy. Ontario is, easily 40+% of the GDP, the population, whatnot. We have access to market, we have a growing population, we have sustainable wood, right? So can you just talk a little bit about, you touched on it a little bit in your opening comments, can you give a little more detail about what you're doing to position us as a global leader?
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate the comment and the opportunity to be here to speak about what Ontario is doing to advance our forestry sector here in the province. It's important for us to recognize the resources of our province, but also the hard work our government has been putting in to develop strategies to help put and keep Ontario on the map as a global leader in the forest bioeconomy. As you indicated, our resources, especially in the forest sector, are vast, and I think the government's done exemplary work to push for new programs to support the sector moving forward. So we've, I came into this portfolio in August, and we had initiated some strategies moving forward to support the sector through collaboration with industry and the sector in general. But now, programs such as the Forest Biomass Program, the Advanced Wood Construction Program, the FISIP program, to really look at new ways that we can maximize the potential from biomass out of the forest industry to sustain that industry moving forward. There's no doubt there's some challenges that we're facing, and these programs are going to go a long way to provide that stability and sustainability for the sector moving forward. So it's the investments, kind of line up, are part of our forest sector strategy, which is a 10-year roadmap to create jobs and encourage the economic growth in the forest sector, while we continue to support the Indigenous communities, northern and rural communities, and that depend on the sector, and continue to ensure Ontario's forests are managed sustainably for generations to come. We're delivering strategies, investing in businesses, cutting red tape, and advancing innovation, and we're helping Ontario's forest industry adapt to changing markets by encouraging companies to invest and supporting those investments. Through our forest sector investment and innovation program, we're providing $10 million each year to help businesses increase productivity and expand their operations. Through our forest biomass program, we're providing $20 million each year to increase our use of wood and the use of the wood in innovative ways. These measures will help the forest sector stabilize and diversify by creating new opportunities, driving the modernization and expanding and strengthening our supply chains. We're also helping sawmills deal with, reduction in the closing of some of our pulp mills, particularly in northeastern Ontario, with a $10 million sawmill chip support program, while we continue to find new mass consumers of the biomass and mill residuals. And again, like I said in my opening remarks, listening to some of the panel discussions yesterday, it's really the people in this room that are going to be driving that forward in what we can do to bring on some of those other mass consumers of the biomass. So, but we're also taking other incentives by listening to the industry. Ian Dunn and I have regular conversations, as well as I'm very fortunate in Thunder Bay that we have a very big forest sector. As I mentioned in my remarks, they're the backbone of our economy for generations and will continue to be so. And the sector, even from my time before landing in this role, but just as MPP, being elected as MPP, they're very engaged with me with regards to what the challenges we're facing in the sector, what some of the ideas they had and what we needed to move forward. And that's afforded me the opportunity to continue those conversations, discussions with my colleagues at Queen's Park. One of the things that kept coming up was the biomass power, and we've recently renegotiated 5 agreements for 5-year terms on the biomass energy production file. But I'm also hearing from industry that we need to have a little bit longer term contracts so that they can attract the investment that they need to make into their operations to help provide that stability and sustainability moving forward. So recently, Minister Lecce has come into the file, and I've had those conversations with him pretty immediately. And I'm encouraged that in his recent announcement, going back about 3 weeks ago, where he identified the increased needs of energy production in Ontario, and we listed biomass energy production as a sustainable, renewable source of energy production. It's the first time in Ontario that biomass has been identified as a source of energy production to meet the needs of the province moving forward. So that's very encouraging. We're continuing those conversations. I'm hopeful that we're going to see some movement on that file, but again, it's been through the collaboration and the discussions that I've been able to have with industry leaders that has really helped develop that framework moving forward. And that's one of the biggest tasks I have right now is what does it look like 10, 15, 20 years out? So our government is very keen on making sure that we have that planning moving forward and to show that, we're not doing the one-offs on supports, that we're providing a stable path forward for the industry. And I'm really encouraged by those opportunities, and I think that with continued collaboration with the industry, we're going to see that happen. My style isn't about, we're the government, this is what you need to be doing. I believe, and our Premier is on record as saying that government's role is about creating the environment for people and businesses to be successful. And that's how we're approaching this, that's how we're going to move forward. And we're very much, the Premier is very much focused on the message that Ontario is open for business. So.
Great. Thank you, Minister. Jason, moving on to you, Ontario is located on, we are within traditional territories of a number of First Nations and Indigenous communities, and as such, we are subject to, over 40 legal treaties that guide our relationship between the Crown and Indigenous communities. There's been some progress that's been made over the years in the space around management of resources. You look at the sustainable forest licenses that are out there right now. Over 51% have some direct Indigenous participation, including over 12 that are actually managed by communities or directly by Indigenous-led companies. Lots of work to continue to be done. We can probably have a whole conference discussing about that. But I do want to talk a little bit about your experience. You've spent your career in the natural resource sector, doing project development, building out projects. Talk a little bit about the important role of proponents engaging with these communities and the value of it, and how that can accelerate project development based off your experience.
Sure. Thanks, Chris, and appreciate the comments, Minister Holland. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here to speak on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation and the community's traditional lands of Ginoogaming. When we think of the relationship as far as treaties and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, just wanted to ask the audience here by show of hands, how many are familiar with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action? Many? Okay. How many have looked at the wording of any of the treaties in the province of Ontario? Some. Less than the Truth and TRC. And I bring this up because when we think of the future of not just Ontario, I'll speak specifically for Ontario, but any province or territory in Canada, that future for the bioeconomy cannot be realized with the full and meaningful participation of First Nation communities. When I look at the map that's put on the screen, there's another overlay of what could be discussed related to forest tenure and the modernization process. I think it's about almost 51% that have some direct or indirect involvement in forest management from an Indigenous perspective, but only 13% have some direct oversight. I was a part of a few of those developments spanning back 15 to 20 years ago, and they are long-term initiatives that take time to develop the understanding and the relationship at the community level to advance, specifically in the Ogoki and the Ginoogaming and other forest units that have had Indigenous communities drive forward on their intention for land management and also the consideration of the treaties. So the 40 treaties that Chris had referenced earlier is an agreement between the Crown and those First Nations. My community signed Treaty Number 9 in 1905, and that agreement is evergreen. That agreement is co-decision making of the land and benefits that come from the land. And when we look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, call action number 92 asks corporations operating in Canada to adopt the principles of the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People and free prior informed consent framework in their operations policy. We're seeing more reconciliation action plans come out the woodworks with companies looking at different ways of how they can adopt those principles in their operations and consider this concept of reconciliation or economic reconciliation. I think why this is important to the forest sector as well as to the banking industry and institutional investors is the Equator Principles now is recognizing those rights around free prior informed consent, that the Canadian Sustainability Standards Board next month is going to release its first standards related to corporate reporting for climate-related disclosures and Indigenous relations and reconciliation disclosures. Also, the federal government has opened up the discussion on the Federal Corporation Business Act that will require private companies to report on their sustainability disclosures. So when we look at the opportunity around partnership, There is much that we can do from a transformative opportunity in this new era of truth and reconciliation, but also to adhere to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action and work together with Indigenous peoples in the spirit of the treaties. When I think of the premium opportunities that are there in the market with the slide here of 10 million tons per year opportunity, there's much opportunity for Indigenous nations to be a part of those projects, to be a part of the investment, and to consider how the governance works moving forward related to achieving the social license and the free, prior, informed consent to move a lot of those projects forward. When we look at specifically the procurement market for electricity in the province and some of the remote communities that are on diesel generators, there's opportunities to leverage the bioeconomy to support the 5,000 megawatts that the province of Ontario will require, and also look at reducing or eliminating the use of diesel in remote communities and also other areas. When we also look at the far north boundary, not what's dedicated on the map to the forest units, there's also a unique opportunity to work with some of the far north communities related to their land use planning. So there is also fiber that has not been identified here on this map, which could be a future generational opportunity to advance with some of those nations related to studies and related to supporting some of their initiatives from a nation-to-nation negotiating perspective with industry. Part of my board role with the Anishinaabe Business Professional Association, we've been advocating for the inclusion and fair opportunities in contracting for Indigenous business in Northern Ontario, primarily the 5 treaty areas of Treaty 3, 5, 9, the Robinson, Superior, Robinson Huron Treaty. We believe that industry and government must work together collectively to achieve a future related to consent-based agreements. And in Canada, free, prior, informed consent could be our competitive advantage from a global markets and investment perspective. There are credit ratings agencies that will provide opportunities for companies that will have better reputation to be able to de-risk their projects with First Nation partnerships and consent that achieve a lower weighted average cost of capital related to greenfield development. And there's also new opportunities for repatriating some of the assets and equity participation for nations in some of the existing opportunities related to projects. So I think working together is one of the key messages that I continue to reinforce, and that the future of our bioeconomy it depends on our collective ability to work together in the spirit of respect and the opportunity to collectively have those advantages in the marketplace. So, miigwech.
Great. Thank you, Jason. All right. Ian, so OFIA, your association represents over 50 companies, probably well represented on this map. Almost all of them, I bet, pretty much are represented within your organization. You know, we've obviously not been immune in Ontario to the global pressures that are out there. You know, I don't know that we fully recovered from the 2008 housing crisis when we lost production. You know, we're seeing, you know, obviously some market challenges now, tariffs, duties, all those good things like that. Shift to offshore production, whatnot. But you know, where does you and your members see, you know, the bioeconomy and, let's say, valorizing the forest even further and tapping into some of this additional opportunity that helps them grow? And what are your members seeing in this as the opportunity for growth?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And certainly just picking up on what Jason said, in partnerships with Indigenous communities is going to be absolutely critical. And there's already some amazing projects underway that Jason's been really involved in. The Boundary Waters Forest, the Papassay Sawmill with BNA, Agoki Development Corporation, Lake Nipigon Forest, Wikwemekong's Community Heat Project, White Sands Biomass Project. Like it's, in many respects, I think Indigenous communities are ahead of us on the biomass and the bioeconomy side, supported, of course, by the province. I think it's important to set the industry kind of in context. What's happened to the North American forest products sector over the last 20 years has been a lot of industry consolidation, industry rationalization, capacity and investment dollars moving to lower cost jurisdictions. I think of Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil, Indonesia, China. These are where the big investments in pulp and paper primarily are going. And of course, the solid wood sector, that we have a very advanced solid wood sector in the province of Ontario, some world-class facilities, but they are really dependent on the offtake of the residuals that are produced by making lumber. So sawdust, chips, and bark, all of that has to have some kind of market, some place to go. And historically, that's been the pulp and paper sector. In 2006, there were 16 pulp and paper mills in this province consuming 18 million cubic meters of volume, just the pulp and paper sector, more than the current total harvest of the entire sector. And there are 3 currently operating in the province. So that is a huge amount of volume that's been taken out of the system. And so the sawmill sector, the solid wood sector is looking for the future of these residuals. And there's been some very important programs that the province has pulled together. The forest biomass program, of course, the sawmill chip program. The residuals are shifting the way they move, so they're going further into Quebec. Some are moving further west. But the industry is looking at the bioeconomy as a source of longer-term stability for the sector. Certainly wanting to attract investment into the pulp and paper sector, but the work that we're doing on biomass and the bioeconomy is going to be absolutely central to that. We look at energy, so we mentioned energy already. The province is going to need 75% more electricity by 2050, and we think there's a really important role for the forest products sector to do that. We have a number of members in our organization that produce electricity, make pellets for the grid, and I think that's going to be a real source of opportunity for us. But only about 20% of Ontario's energy consumption comes from electricity. The rest is from carbon-emitting fuels, coal, transportation fuels, et cetera, heating fuels. And again, through the Biomass Action Plan, the Biomass Fund, we think there's a really a good opportunity to decarbonize that sector. And of course, I think there's some really important people in this room that are going to make that happen. Finally, I'll end on the opportunity, and we talk about the consolidation of the sector over the last 20 years. Again, not specific to Ontario, but something that's been experienced throughout North America. But there is a unique opportunity here in Ontario. Chris has mentioned it. The available harvest in the province is about 28 million cubic meters. I know we had a delegation from Finland here yesterday. They harvest about 80 million cubic meters in a country about a third of the size of Ontario. They have a very intensive forestry program, a very advanced forest economy, but there's no reason we can't grow more wood and harvest more wood. So even 28 million cubic meters, that should be the start. And we're seeing a lot of interest in Ontario. We're seeing a lot of investment in forest companies moving into Ontario because we are one of the last jurisdictions globally where wood supply, fiber supply is not a limiting factor. So since 2018, about $4.6 billion has been invested into Ontario's forest product sector. We're seeing companies like Interfor, primarily a Western company, American company, moving into Ontario. Dryden Fiber, First Quality, Thunder Bay, Atlas. A lot of investment is coming into Ontario because of our well-managed forest and a very pro-business, open-for-business government with Minister Holland in charge, with Premier Ford. So I want to end on the opportunity. I think this is, I think we're going to be a real powerhouse moving forward.
Thanks, Ian. Okay, Glenn, so we have, we always hear about Finland, we hear about Sweden, we hear about all these great European countries that are doing great things, and it's almost exclusively private land. And so they're able to do things and work off of private land a little differently, right or wrong, than compared to what we do when we do our Crown Forest sustainability. But talk a little bit about what you're so, the Ontario Woodlot Association is doing, you represent private woodlot owners in the province, and I think it's something that flies under the radar. I don't think we talk about private land much. And I also want you to discuss a little bit about some of the work that we've been working with you on and others on quantifying the volume of wood that you believe we can get off these private woodlots. And I think the key part of this is these private woodlots are in the south, typically. I know I got to get you into northwestern Ontario and assess those private lands in the northwest, but we're talking about potential source of biomass in wood that is very close to the market. So talk a little bit about the work you've been doing and tell us a little bit about the opportunity.
Yeah, so thanks, Chris. Since given the audience is an national audience, I'll put some context around where private land sits relative to Crown land and production. So 20% of the wood harvested in Canada comes from private land. So that's 1 in 5 logging trucks on the road is coming from a private forest. It's not small. Finland is our feature country. If private land in Canada were a country, it would land in between Sweden and Finland in terms of output. And economically, it's similar to agriculture, and people don't realize that. It's all about the Crown land management in wood. We have the ability to contribute significantly too. So here in Ontario, private land harvest is about 1.8 million tons. We believe that there's an opportunity to increase that, modestly, some conservative estimates to, about 3.6 million tons. Just in the city of Ottawa and the adjacent counties, we believe there's about 900,000 tons available. So that's within an hour's drive of where we're sitting right here. So it's a pretty significant opportunity, and right now we sit at a little over 10%, maybe 13% of that 13 million number coming from private land in Ontario. So it's a little bit of context, but how do we know some of those numbers? The reason we know some of those numbers is because CRIBE funded our pilot project to map the 5.5 million hectares of private land in Ontario and do a comprehensive forest inventory very similar to what's being done on Crown land. We work really closely with the Ministry of Natural Resources to access data that they have on private land. So we're using LiDAR, we're using satellite imagery, and we're using the latest techniques to inventory those properties. We're close to markets. Southern Ontario is a huge market, and our wood grows fast and it's high value. But we have a bit of a checkered past of management on private land. And we have climate change and invasive species. Those two are huge for our landowners. If you own 100 acres and a windstorm flattens 80% of that, that's a big loss. If you have a forest that's susceptible to a certain invasive insect that comes in and takes out 30% of your trees, that's an uncontrolled harvest. So we have programs to respond to this, but we need partners like the folks in this room. We can't do it alone. I think the folks from Nova Scotia said it well. We need to be good at being small, and we're good partners. You can attest to that, Chris. We want to work with folks here. The last thing I'll say, I have some stalwart members here, and they would be disappointed if I didn't point out the fact that they don't just own and manage their forest because of wood fiber. They do it because they love the forest, because they recreate there, because they love the wildlife. There's all these different things. They take great pride in that. So we have a really great story to tell as a partner, and a really great value proposition, for folks who want to work with us. So I'll leave it there, Chris. We're an untapped opportunity.
Thank you. Are there any questions? We got 3 minutes left. Do we have any questions? We have a question.
So good to see you, Chris. How are you?
Hi. Okay, so the question is, I think this is an important. This is an interesting question. It's how do you? This really has to do with Ontario colleges, and we're talking about applied research and trade skills. how does that play a role in furthering Ontario's bioeconomy? And I think there's a couple of parts of this that touches on two things. One is the applied research space. And the other one is highly skilled people and the need to train people in trades and whatnot. So who wants to touch that one first? Yeah.
Yeah. So we work really closely with a handful of colleges. For a couple of those colleges, we are the face of the forest industry. We bring those students out into the forest. We have them working for us right now, and so we're working towards making sure we have those skills. And we've been able to increase through our work the number of qualified folks out there on the forest doing good work for the province.
Minister.
So thanks for the question. That's really important on two fronts. On the skilled trades, first of all, Ontario has invested very heavily on skilled trades development. Minister Piccini has made several announcements over the last year and a half through his different Working for Workers legislation that has come forward. So we're very focused on the skilled trades development that we need to support the industry, particularly the natural resources industries in my area in Northern Ontario. We know there's a shortage. We're putting in the measures to address that. But just as importantly, we're working with Lakehead University and Thunder Bay, by example. I've had several meetings with them over the last year and a half, 2 years, with regards to what role they can play to continue advancing their research in the forestry industry. We had a meeting probably 3 weeks ago now where a private company or an organization, a group in Thunder Bay came with me, and the university is going to move forward on what we need to do specifically and what role the universities can play in helping to attract the investment that we've been talking about here over the last couple of days. So they're absolutely playing an important role in it, and I think the initiatives that we've been putting in place to support both the skilled trades development and the research is going to be key to us seeing the sustainability that we're all looking for.
Yeah. Jason, do you want to touch on that a little bit, looking at the perspective of Indigenous youth and skilled trades within their communities and keeping folks within the communities and within the industry and bringing value back to the community? Do you want to talk a little bit of Indigenous perspective on that?
Yeah, there's huge opportunity to also work with what's called the assets holders, which are ISETS holders, Indigenous skills facilities and training institutes that partner with the likes of Confederation College or Lakehead University and the other institutes that are out there specifically for training. There's a huge unemployment rate in remote communities, 80 to 90% unemployment. Indigenous youth are the fastest growing demographic in Canada from a population perspective. So there's a lot of opportunity to link those career pathways with the career navigator, and having the youth involved in all aspects from the stump right to the facility, and looking at new tech and innovative ways to get involved in the bioeconomy.
Okay, great. Okay, I think we're at time here, so I want to thank this panel. It's been a great conversation, and we have tremendous opportunity. So thank you again. Thanks, everybody.